Hey guys, it's Atheist for the Cause here with an opinion piece real quickly about North Korea. I was watching Fox News earlier today and just watching them recently. They have all these libertarians on now, and I think they're going for the younger crowd. And, libertarians are basically always against war. They don't think about it in any sort of pragmatic way. It's just, oh, my principle is I'm against war, so there's basically no justified war. Well, what that gives you is very little power around the world, and then something like, World War II happens, and you, if you're not drawn into the war, everybody else will be destroyed, and then you'll be destroyed afterwards. Um, but getting beyond that, more directly in regards to North Korea, I actually advocate that we should go to war with North Korea. Here's why. There are lots of reasons, but one major reason is China is not happy with North Korea right now. So now is the time to strike. Um, Not only that, North Korea actually poses a serious threat to the USA. Um, Now they have the nukes and they have the missiles. It's not, the missiles aren't able to deliver their payload completely yet, but they can actually travel the distance as far. Some of the later missiles tested, they can go as far as Chicago. And the next missile that they have will be able to strike Washington, D.C. I've gone over this in some of my other videos. So and this is actually from a North Korean based platform. They also have submarines that they're developing the capability to launch from submarines, and that's a much more serious threat because you don't know where submarines are going to end up, and you can pretty much plan and have your missile defense set up from to stop any land-based launches, but it would be really tough to stop a submarine launch. And we basically, I think what we should do is destroy their entire submarine fleet. But furthermore, I think we should completely dismantle the North Korean regime. We should accelerate a the Korean, as in Korean, reunite the Korean, the two Koreas into Korea with the C, and allow South Korea to take over and build up North Korea. And I would work with China so that I know that I would see if China would be willing to help us to destroy North Korea. They probably wouldn't, but as long as they would stay out, we could sell them on the idea as like we'll keep North Korea demilitarized, so we'll keep the demilitarized zone where it is, and we'll keep all military out of what is now North Korea. It'll become part of the reunified Korea, but it'll stay demilitarized. So I really don't understand these ideas that people have to sit back and either do nothing or continue to talk, which has completely failed, or Scott Adams had the idea of putting it on China, and if we get attacked, then we attack China. The thing with that is, I think that works better after they've completely developed, the ability to nuke us, where they don't have that complete ability. So in the short term, all that's going to do is allow North Korea to get that ability. I think we can strike before they have the ability fully developed, and I do think that we can take out much of the artillery. You could potentially evacuate people from Seoul and South Korea, but if some lives are lost, I mean, long term, it's not going to be good for us or the world if the DPRK is allowed to continue. And what do you think's really going to happen from the U.S.'s perspective? The long term, they're going to side with Russia and China. They're not going to side with the U.S., and they're not going to have great humanitarian rights either. So long term, you have terrible humanitarian situation. You have a regime that's going to be pro China, who's becoming our biggest competition basically, and pro Russia, who's constantly been hostile to the USA, and pro Iran, who wants to wipe the USA and Israel off the face of the planet. I mean, you're not going to end up with a pro US regime anyways. So why not take them out now and get that land, consolidate it to effectively South Korea, where you have a pro-American government. And the people are living, you can sell this on humanitarian issues, because the people in South Korea live much better than the people in North Korea. That's undoubted. That's indisputable. So, the economy is much better for South Korea than North Korea. And you can keep the demilitarized zone so that China isn't quite as threatened if our military is only in the what is now South Korea. So it just makes a lot of sense to me to actually come up with a military strike. Economic sanctions aren't going to work. Now we're sanctioning Chinese companies. That's only going to upset the Chinese even more. Now let's go over how this could go wrong for the U.S. I mean, let's not forget, we went through the Korean War, and we absolutely destroyed China and the DPRK forces. I mean, so I was actually doing a little reading recently, and the USA didn't have this huge advantage back then. In fact, China actually had better planes, better fighters, and their propulsion systems were better. They basically had these MiGs that were better than our planes, and they were tearing up our bombers when we tried to do any sort of daylight missions. But when we were retreating, because we didn't recognize that the Chinese were had taken part and taken up arms with the DPRK. It was basically a surprise attack, and so we were giving ground, and we were still inflicting huge losses. And this is back in a time where our military was still pretty young, so we didn't have great coordination between land, air, and ground forces. And right now we have amazing coordination. We have, our entire military is built on coordination. And sure, Chinese forces have gotten much more able to attack the sea. But, their ability to attack the air during the Korean War was there, and it was probably greater than it is now. Now, China is going through this transition phase right now to update their military, but they haven't actually gone through it yet, which is they haven't gotten completely through it. So that's another great reason where the timing is just perfect, and there's a window where the Chinese are unhappy with the DPRK. They realize the long-term threat from the DPRK to themselves if relationships ever go sour, where the DPRK will have nukes to use against China. And, China's military it's in the middle of a transition right now. And China's they've never really had a great fighting force in modern history. I mean, they just get rolled every time they're in a war. So, they can count the Korean War as a win if they want, but they took so many more unbelievable losses, even with the surprise attack on the U.S. forces. And the U.S. forces were greatly outnumbered and still absolutely destroyed them. So, and now I would say our advantage is actually even greater. Um, and the thing, so here, but here's the one thing. If you're, it's gonna go south. Like, say, artillery and stuff. There's these like chemical drones that North Korea can use to spread the population and inflict tons of casualties. So say, we don't hit as much artillery as we want, and North Korea just starts launching at South Korea's population. Um, by the way, there's no guarantee they would do that just to randomly try to kill South Koreans. Like, that's not gonna really do anything for them militarily, but I mean, I guess it could happen. So let's say they do that, and then if they're launching, at Seoul, then our forces can just go and destroy them, because again, they're launching at Seoul. I think if you put pressure on the artillery with forces, then they're going to be forced to shoot at your forces and not civilians. But anyways, so you have that, and then but the China could say the main threat would be China if they did intervene, or even Russia could intervene as well, because people don't really realize that Russia actually borders North Korea. It's just a tiny tip on the very east coast, but it does technically. So maybe Russia or China would get involved and they could start shooting at our satellites. I don't know if you remember a couple years ago. I don't know if it was like 2010, 2012, something like that. They like launched a satellite into space and destroyed it. That was a military action. They were basically planning on, trying to figure out how to destroy our space satellites. And if you take down our space satellites, you can inflict lots of monetary damage, and it would take a long time to put those back up, and you'd create all kinds of space debris problems. You would just create a lot of chaos, basically. You'd take down, if you could take down enough of them, you'd lessen GPS capabilities. If you could take down all of them, you could severely hurt our forces, but still, I just don't think that, you have to say, well, will China do that? I just don't think they will. North Korea no longer, this small buffer, they basically want North Korea because they want that buffer so that the U.S. can't invade. But, I mean, we are so financially intertwined, and the world in general is just not quite as imperial as it used to be, or colonial as it used to be. I think the threat of the U.S. invading China is not as high as it used to be. I mean, they're not communists anymore, so you have that, and I just think that China would look at it and they'd be extremely unhappy. But I don't think that with their military where it is and the DPRK getting nukes, they don't really want the nukes, next to them. Why would they really step in again? And they took huge losses last time from stepping in. I just don't see it. So, and the way their military is set up is like asymmetrical warfare. That's kind of what Russia would do too. So, their way of basically what I was reading is China's plan to beat the U.S. would basically be hold out as long as possible in a defensive posture and create psychological warfare where you win over the public in the United States, convince them that the war is unjust, and that will take away the power from the military because we'll have to withdraw. But I don't think that really, if China's defending North Korea, I think that winning that psychological warfare is going to be a lot more difficult. So overall, I just think I don't really see the benefits for China or Russia to intervene. North Korea is not a huge powerhouse militarily, anyways. Some people try to say it is, but they're so poor and their military is not well trained. It's not well fed. They're just most of it's just your average person that has some training, because they basically like train the entire population. But um, that doesn't mean that their military is good by any means. Their technology is, some of it's provided by China, but overall it's still not even close to like an elite military to challenge the United States. So I don't see what protecting a country like this does for China and Russia. All it does is guarantee a nuclear power on their doorstep. That makes no sense. That'd be like us saying, oh, Mexico, we're getting along with you right now, but we're gonna defend you, like going nuclear and being extremely hostile towards other countries. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. So anyways, I'll talk to you guys later. I think the best method for solving the North Korean situation is dismantling the government through conventional means and reunifying Korea, as in Korea, and trying to talk to China to let them know, hey, this is happening and do not intervene, or we will have to fight your forces, and that won't be good for you. So remind them of the losses that they took in the previous Korean War. So anyways, I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good one.